Never let the voice of self-doubt play louder than the voice that created the ambition. I wrote that down a long time ago and spent the last decade figuring out what it actually meant. Have you ever talked yourself out of something and then watched someone else do exactly what you said you couldn't? Have you ever confused the absence of someone else's validation with the absence of your own ability? This week, I'm going back to the beginning to explore key moments, key places, key decisions, and the impact it has in overcoming self-doubt. Someone told me before I wrote my first book, why bother? Books are hard to sell. They were right about that part. What they didn't know, what I didn't know, is that those words didn't warn me. They tuned me into a frequency I've been managing ever since. You see, the doubt was never about whether I could finish. It was quieter than that. It asked, are you good enough? It asked whether my stories needed someone else's permission to exist. So I asked myself one question. Can this story exist without them? Them as in traditional publishers. And the answer was yes. And then I turned down the volume. But here's what nobody tells you. The moment you answer one version of self-doubt, another one walks through the door. 2010, I was writing my first book, Consequences, Breaking the Negative Cycle. So this was my first book. It was a non-fiction book, and it was motivated by the young people that I was working with at the time in Hackney. After months and months of writing, almost a year of writing and editing, this is where we had the book launch, my first book launch. And I didn't want it to be just about my work. I wanted it to be about young people. So I shared the stage. I made an open call for different poets. So it was a poetry night / book launch. Had about 50 people turn up at that first event. It was September the 19th, 2011. So just after the riots. But yeah, it was a good evening. Some very talented people. I remember I had a guitarist that turned up. George the poet was there before he blew up into a phenomenal poet, which I remember when I contacted him to perform and I was looking at his work at the time, I was blown away. So when he came, he did his thing then, and I just said that there's something special, there's something different about him, and he was going to blow up in a way that I didn't think other poets would have blown up, and that's exactly what happened. So yeah, he was here that day, and many other people who came out to support my first piece of work. But when I look back, there was a lot of doubt during that period. But ultimately, for me, the message was more important. Growing up here is part of the journey, It's part of how I ended up writing Consequences, Breaking the Negative Cycle. Saw things, experienced things. Ultimately, everything happens for a reason, because when I reflect on how this place shaped who I am, it answers a lot of the questions in regards to why I decided to use stories as a medium to share my ideas. Using stories as a medium to make change, to get people thinking. And it all started in being in this cage. We used to be here night and day with the guys. And it's funny how life is. It's like over time, everybody just goes their own way. Sometimes it's bad news that brings us together. Sometimes it's celebrating somebody. But one thing we'll always have is those memories. So fast forward, 2014, started writing Ambitions of the Deprived. So this would be my first storytelling book, my first novel. And then after a year and a bit of writing, I remember I had the name of this book before I actually started writing it. I remember I woke up from it wasn't even a dream, it was like how can I call it? It was like I was half asleep, and I remember waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I wrote down Ambitions of the Deprived on a piece of paper. I didn't know what it meant, but I just wrote it down and I just put it in my notebook. And a few months later, when I started working on a story, I was like, Ambitions of the Deprived. And then as soon as I said that, I remember that night, literally the plot and the story came to me. Fast forward to June 18th, 2015, I launched this book right here at the Rose Lipman Community Centre. So the audience increased. So from Old Street, where we did Consequences launch, we now had 125 people here. And similar to last time, it was a celebration of other young people. So we had artists who had drawn or painted their version of what Ambitions of the Deprived meant to them. And we displayed their work, and I remember one of them actually sold their work and got recognition at The Guardian. So that was a good launch. It was a good event. A lot of people turned up for that particular event. So yeah, I'm always grateful. Ambitions of the Deprived. After all the hard work, sleepless nights, waking up early, going to bed really late, my second book was finally done, Ambitions of the Deprived. But with this book, the volume of self-doubt increased more than I would like. The story existed, but a great story sitting in your house, sitting in your cupboard, has no impact on anyone. So the doubt shifted frequency. It stopped asking if I was good enough to create. It started asking if I was capable enough to be heard. And that was a whole different proposition. I built momentum in my own ecosystem, book launches, events, speaking gigs, going out on the streets, talking to people, creating a buzz. But at the same time, the ceiling felt real. I remember thinking, I cannot break through without the mainstream engine, without the machine. And then I had to choose. Do I let the volume continue to increase? Or do I start thinking about turning it down so I can break through? I decided to turn it down. I wanted to launch My Sister's Pain here, 800 to 1,000 plus seats. My very first thought, honest, unfiltered, was there's no way I can do this. I thought to myself, I don't know that many people. That's what I said to a friend of mine, Robin Travis, who had already done what I wanted to do, which was fill up the Hackney Empire. Robin is a great writer who had done this before. So he helped me turn down that volume of self-doubt during this period. I already placed the ceiling above my own head before I reached for it. But something said, ask the question before you accept the answer. In 2016, I started writing My Sister's Pain. This is not the original cover. I had an artistic cover that was done by two sisters, Azaria and Zalika Williams. Shout out to them for the original cover. My Sister's Pain sort of inspired when I gave a talk at Holloway Women's Prison a few years before. That sort of ignited the idea, and then from there started writing in 2016, and in 2017 we were able to do the launch here at Hackney Empire with more than 750 people in attendance. So yeah, another significant milestone to overcoming self-doubt and what I felt I was capable of doing. After that wonderful night at the Hackney Empire for My Sister's Pain, that night I understood something I carry with me into every new chapter. Self-doubt is not a verdict, it's a pattern. And once you know it is a pattern, you stop fearing it. You start managing it. We all like an unexpected gift, something that comes earlier than expected, that Amazon delivery that comes a day earlier. Well, this one is different. My daughter was born here at 26 weeks. She came 3 months earlier than expected. You see, we spent 7 months in this hospital, and somewhere inside these walls, those 7 months, we lived in fear. There was a level of uncertainty. There was love. The particular kind of love that lives right next door to terror. She weighed 835 grams. I repeat, 835 grams. At first, I felt scared to hold her, to do skin to skin. But the comfort, the support by all of the nurses, the doctors, the surgeons, the specialists, care that they give, I can never forget it. Forever grateful for what they did for our family. And in these moments is where I decided to write. Not because the timing was right, but because writing was the only volume I could turn up when everything else was unbearable. The doubt never stood a chance against that, because I was fighting for something. Sometimes the why doesn't need words. Sometimes it just needs the presence and the understanding that there's a greater purpose. So this was the entrance we used to use to get to the neonatal unit. So this was home essentially for about 7 months. Throughout that lockdown period, we were in here every single day with our little miracle baby. And most of that time being surrounded by all of the machines that were keeping all of these young babies alive. I was writing this book, Ikenna, which means strength of a father. It's not a story about what happened to us during this period, but it's another story about fatherhood, a relationship between Ikenna and his father, Tobechukwu. So this is how I was able to escape by doing what I love, which is writing and creating stories. Yeah, I always wanted to, every time I reflect and think back, I'm just thankful for our story in terms of how it turned out. Thankful for all of the doctors, the surgeons, the neonatal nurses who looked after our girl every day, 24 hours. So this place always has a special place in my heart, as well as Evelina Children's Hospital. That's another story for another day. But yeah, always good to come back and reflect. So how do I actually do it? Overcome self-doubt, challenge it, and push it to the side. Not in theory, in practice. When the doubt is loud and the evidence feels thin, and the next steps feels unclear, here are some of the stages that I use. Stage 1, I name it, not in my head, out loud or on paper, because doubt survives in silence. The moment I say, I'm afraid this won't reach anyone. I'm afraid I'm not the person to take this forward. It loses mass. It shrinks from a feeling into a sentence, and sentences can be answered. Silence can't. Stage 2, I go back to the why, not the goal, because goals shift. Goals can grow. Goals attract bigger doubts. The why is the anchor. Why did I write my first book? Because the story had to exist. Why did I make Stolen Dreams? Because I wanted to explore redemption, go beyond the consequences, and to tell the truth that will get young people thinking from a critical perspective about the future they want to live. Why am I documenting this process in public week by week for the next 2 years, and all of the sacrifices I need to make in order to make this happen? Because if somebody feels inspired by my journey, then it's been worth it. Because if one person can make that change, and I can touch that individual, then I feel like I've made the right choice. The why has always been louder than the doubt. Stage 3, I look at the evidence. The doubt has short memory. My job is to remind it, to pull the receipts, to pull the evidence, not arrogantly, Honestly, 750 people at the Hackney Empire when I said I didn't know enough people. A book written in 7 months inside hospital while my daughter was fighting to survive. A film screened in Berlin, Manchester, London, Birmingham. Over 1,000 people in different rooms have watched Stolen Dreams and felt something. Seeing their faces, getting their feedback meant something. It was something I was supposed to do. The doubt was wrong, and I was wrong for doubting myself. But time to turn the volume down. Stage 4. I take the smallest possible next steps, not the whole staircase, one step at a time, because doubt feeds off distance. When the destination feels further away and far, the doubt fills that space between where you are and where you're trying to go. So I close the distance. One email, one scene, 1 week of footage, one conversation with the right person. Motion is the enemy of doubt, not confidence. Motion. You don't wait until you feel ready. You just move, keep on moving, and readiness will always follow. Stage 5. I turn the volume down, but keep it playing. This is the one that took the longest for me to understand. I used to think that the goal was silence, that one day that doubt would stop showing up. It doesn't stop showing up. And now I know. And actually, I don't want it to. The doubt means the stakes are real. It means I care enough for the outcome to matter. A life without it means I had to stop reaching for anything worth reaching for. So I don't fight it. I manage it. I turn it down just enough so the voice that created the ambition, the voice that said write the books, make the film, document this process, trust the vision, that plays louder. That voice has never been wrong so far. And lastly, other people's silence about your work is not a review of your ability. It is just silence. And silence can be filled by doubt or by the next piece of work. The choice is always yours. Next week, Enfield screening of Stolen Dreams. I'll get to show you the behind the scenes of what that looks like. See you next week.